Several months ago I was asked to speak at the American Society for Quality meeting here in San Antonio, and I had spoken there before several times, and I was asked to come up with a keynote presentation for the section, and I started thinking to myself, about a year and a half ago I had given a presentation to the ASQ section, and it was on facilitation, and I walked them through a facilitation technique that I had used, and we facilitated what was the most important things that the section could do to encourage membership. And the top thing that came out was to provide the attendees at the meetings more tools that they could immediately take to their work center and employ. So as I was thinking about what to provide, I started thinking about a planning approach that I use on a regular basis for the last several years that I call the PDCA approach to project planning. Now, I wrote the plan to deliver this speech in 10 minutes during that meeting at a break. What I'm going to show you today, you could deliver in under an hour a project plan that will ensure success. So we will go over today this basic planning tool that is extremely easy to repeat, is going to ensure that you are doing the right things, and when you are given a project that you complete it as someone would expect it to be completed. That it allows for an easy way for you to create a timeline, and it will take you, I know you're not going to believe this, but it will take you less than an hour to create the plan. Like I said, when I wrote the plan to give this presentation, which occurred 3 months later, that plan took me 10 minutes to write. Also, what I hope to gain out of this is a lasting connection for future collaboration and learning with you, the listener of this presentation. And I'll talk to you about why I have that on there and how it is related to the plan that I came up with in 10 minutes. So it's our human nature to basically solve problems. When somebody comes to you and they say, I need something done, we immediately jump to solving the problem. And the concept of this presentation is to stop you from doing that, to get you to sit back for less than an hour and think about what it is that you really are trying to do, and draft up a high-level plan so that you can focus on truly solving what is the problem. Now, this actually came out working with the Air Force Civil Engineering Agency, and what had happened is they had developed a strategic plan, and in the plan they had an objective aligned to the fire department. The colonel that was in charge of that objective had written the objective down that he was to develop and institute specific fire department training. So they went out through the Air Force Civil Engineering Support Agency, and they developed this training, and they instituted it, and they started training people, and at a certain point he came back to the general in charge of the agency and said, I've completed the objective and I'd like to close this strategic objective. And the general looked at him and said, well, Have you reduced the number of bogus fire alarms, and have you increased fire awareness, and have you, etc., etc.? And the colonel stopped him and he's like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know that's what you wanted me to do. See, the thing is, he got the task to develop fire department training and went right about developing fire department training without thinking about why he needed to develop that training. And unfortunately, and I am a product of this too, we have a tendency to jump to do. We immediately try to solve, try to fix, try to turn that screw on whatever it is that we have been given a task to do. And this presentation is designed to literally prevent you from doing that and give you a way to better plan your project that you have been given, or you have assumed, or you decided that you're going to take on. So one of the things that I need you to kind of understand is what PDCA is. Some people listening to this might already be aware of the acronym and have maybe heard about it. But PDCA stands for a cyclical process improvement approach called Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's very common in the process improvement area, especially in the area of lean. It's not as commonly known in other areas, but it is aligned to practically every cyclical approach out there, to include PMI's project planning methodology. Even Lean Six Sigma DMAIC model is based off of a PDCA approach. Now, PDCA was created long ago, but it was first publicized by Walter Shewhart. And Shewhart's cycle is how a lot of people refer to the PDCA model. But Shewhart didn't really make it all that popular until Edward Deming came along, and he started to publicize this approach and applied it to his process improvement methodologies. So it became very popular and often was referred to as the Deming wheel. But for simplicity's sake, PDCA will work. Now, how this came into about in my story is that I was working with another Air Force civil engineering organization, the Air Force Center for Engineering the Environment, and we were doing their strategic plan, and we were discussing the issues that the civil engineering parent company had, and they had asked if there was a way that I could align their strategic plan to ISO 14001, which is, in a sense, ISO 9001 for environmental organizations. But it revolves around a thing called the Environmental Management System, and that is based in PDCA. So we started to look at our objectives and how we were planning them, and we determined a way to actually align all of our strategic objectives in a PDCA model. Now, I will tell you, I was working with Booz Allen at the time, and my boss absolutely hated it. He said that objectives are single occurrences, they have a definite end, and the Plan, Do, Check, Act model is a cyclical model, and it will not work. Well, we didn't listen to him, and we proceeded, and they had a very successful implementation of their plan. And I have been using the PDCA model since then and sharing it with everybody that I work with. As a matter of fact, today I use the PDCA model just as an afterthought. When I get something tasked to me, I immediately jump into the mode of planning through this, and I think about what's required and what do I need to do, and I lay it all out in my head, and I go and I proceed. I don't normally jump to do anymore. Now, that being said, we're all human, and we all do tend to try to solve things first. Look before you leap is what I'm proposing here. So the other thing that's important that we understand in this model is the difference between a project and a program. So a program is a cyclical thing. At its very base, it is something that is continuous, it is ongoing, it may stop at some point, but that's probably going to be a while out. A project, however, has a definite start and a definite end. And it has specific activities that occur to put something in place, to take something away, to improve something that's currently there. You could have a program that's currently working, but it's not working very well, and you want to improve on that program. So you institute a project to improve that program, and when that project is done, the program just continues in its cyclical approach. So the difference, the very basic difference between a project and a program is that the project has a definite start and a definite end. And that's very important to understand, because the PDCA model at its base is actually a cyclical thing. So there's a difference in what I'm going to tell you between how the PDCA model was created and how you're going to use it here. So this is kind of what the PDCA template looks like without Plan, Do, Check, Act in the middle. I will tell you what you're going to see about this is, first off, this is a linear model. It's not cyclical. It's project-based. Secondly, it's going to prevent you from jumping to do. If you apply this, which is very easy to apply, then you will not jump in and start solving something without at least thinking about it beforehand and developing a high-level plan. It's going to ensure that what you wanted to get done actually gets done. So often we jump in to solve a problem, we solve that problem, we turn that screw, and we walk away to go solve some other problem without actually seeing if what we did solved the problem. If it instituted the change, if it fixed whatever it is we were working on, if it put whatever it is in place that's working. So the concept behind this is that it begins with the end. And that's probably the most important thing. But it will at most take you an hour to develop this plan. When I facilitate people through developing the first plan through this, which usually happens when I'm doing strategic planning, it takes me an hour to create one of these. It will take you a lot less the second time and a lot less the third time, to the point where, like me, it's just a regular thing and it takes you minutes to actually develop a well thought out plan. So let's talk about how it's done. I'm going to lead you through the actual effort of developing a PDCA approach plan. So some of you may have heard of Stephen Covey. He has a fairly successful book out there called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And right in the beginning of his book, he talks about this thing called begin with the end in mind. And that's what this is based on, is beginning with the end. So PDCA ends in A, but I'm going to tell you to start with A. I want you to start with the last piece of it, and I want you to take a look at your project, and I want you to say, what is it that I expect out of this project? What are my objectives? What things am I going to analyze at the end of this project to determine whether or not I actually did what I set out to do in the beginning of this? You write those down, and I'm talking like 2 to 3 things, no more than 5. Keep it simple, keep it high level, and put them down in the right-hand block of the template that I showed you. That is your act or your analyze phase of the plan. Then I want you to jump back just one block to check. What I refer to is actually measure, and I want you to write down the things that you can actually physically measure that will lead you to tell you whether or not you've completed something. So if I needed to put in place a project that reduced the number of fire alarms that are bogus, then I would probably measure the number of fire alarms and the number of fire alarms that are bogus. And I would look for a baseline, and then I would look for an adjusted number, and I would probably have some kind of goal set in there of what I expected to reduce it by. So all I'm asking for in this section are, what milestones will you have to achieve? What quantitative measures, the number of X, the percentage of X, and what qualitative measures will be necessary, perhaps a level of adoption by senior leadership, a survey result that has improved in satisfaction through employees or customers or through a process. Those kind of things that are not clearly measured, but you can at least get an idea of whether or not you're doing better than you were when you started this. So having the end in mind, the thing you want to analyze, and then knowing the measures allows you to ensure that what it is you expected to get done will actually occur. So we don't just jump in and start doing something and we never determine whether or not we truly solve the problem that we were setting out to solve. Now you might think that we're going to jump back one more to do, but not really. So I don't know if any of you have ever seen the movie Office Space, one of my personal favorites. But there's a scene in it where the two Bobs, the consultants, are talking to our key actor in the movie, and in the background is a whiteboard that says planning to plan on it. And I always love that saying that you're planning to plan. But the planning piece is really about getting in front of actually developing any kind of plan. The first two things I just had you do. You developed your objectives, you wrote them into your analyze or your act bucket, and you developed the things that you're going to measure, and you put those in your check column. Now you might want to think about, well, who's going to be in charge of this? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be somebody else? Will I or they need a team? And if so, who might those team members be? I don't have to answer that today, but I could say that I'm going to have to put together a team because I know I need it. Do I think I'm going to need a budget? Might want to put together a rough budget for this. A formal budget might come in the actual do step, but initially you might need some money up front. So you might want to think about that. Do I need to research? Do I need to do any benchmarking? Do I need to look at past efforts that I've done that didn't quite solve the problem? Those kind of things would occur in the planning to plan, and you could think of other things that you might need to do before you actually do anything. One of the last things in this phase would be to write down, I'm going to create an implementation plan, a high-level project plan, so to speak, of what it is I'm going to do to implement this. Now, the major aspects of that are going to be in the next phase, which is do. But it helps to say, I'm going to actually write this plan out so that I can follow it. And then the first thing that you do, and yes, now you can jump, is to implement that plan. And what are those major activities that you need to do? You list those out. I might need to get approvals. I might need to socialize. I might need to develop new performance measures and gather a baseline. I might need to actually put something in place, take something away, map a process, perform a DMAIC or lean event. But some of the things that I want you to consider additionally to those implementation activities is that if you're going to change something, think about communicating the change, documenting what you changed and doing away with the old way of doing business, and training everybody that's actually supposed to perform that function or operate within whatever you changed, so that they understand and they're able to adopt the change easily. Additionally, and I did kind of mention this, but you want to ensure that you are measuring. You start measuring in the do what it is that you expect to measure in your check phase. So you would want to start implementing that, and if you needed a baseline for that measure, perhaps you might even need to put that into your plan phase and say, I need to establish new measures that don't exist and gather a baseline so that I know what to expect as an improvement as I go through this project. So now you've actually seen the entire model, and it's just that simple. Literally in 10 minutes to 15 minutes in each one of those phases, you can write down the ideas and track them back. And what you would have is what I did 3 months before I gave this presentation. Robert Perez, the individual that runs all of the speaking activities for the section, asked me on 11 February if I would speak as a keynote speaker in either May or June. I said sure, and I started to think about what it is that I would present. It didn't take me long to think back to what I had told you, and I came up with, well, I will teach this tool because it will give somebody a tool to walk out of that meeting with. So immediately I sat down and said, well, if I'm going to teach this, I'm going to build the plan and I'm going to write it down. And in 10 minutes I wrote this plan. So immediately I said, well, I'm going to want everybody to understand what PDCA is, because if you don't know that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense what Plan, Do, Check, Act is. Why would I use those numbers, those names? Secondly, this is a project-based thing, but PDCA is program, and I already ran into that with a former boss. So I want to make sure that you understand the difference between a project and a program and how this relates. I want to make sure that you understand and you walk away from this how to actually perform PDCA planning. So I want you to understand the PDCA approach to project planning. And the expectation is that the attendees will walk away with a tool, so I actually wanted to create a physical takeaway from this so that they could apply the PDCA, and I wanted to be able to show them how it actually works, so that's why I wrote this plan out. So I was thinking ahead while I was writing this thing out, but why do I go and teach and speak at ASQ or pretty much anywhere? I am trying to build a network, a social network for learning and collaboration. I am a regular blogger on WordPress. I'm active on LinkedIn, as well as Facebook and Twitter, a little bit on SlideShare. But I'd really like to continue to build that social network because I learn, as well as you learn, more about different things by talking about them. So from a personal standpoint, I felt, well, I'm going to just put down there that my expectation is that I'm building my social network. Now, I backed that up one, and I looked at my check and I said, all right, out of those 4 items, I know that I'm going to have a milestone, and that's that I'm going to deliver my keynote address, which was on 13 May. I didn't know that immediately, by the way. I found that out later. I wanted to make sure that I had a handout material that I could give to everybody, because they needed a takeaway. They needed not just a set of slides, but they needed something to be able to use, an actual template. I wanted to ensure that the things that I wanted them to know, that they knew. So I've developed a survey, or I wanted to develop a survey, to actually test their knowledge. So that survey and the test their knowledge was part of my check. I also needed to have some way that I could get LinkedIn invites and WordPress followers and measure that. So those are some measures that I put in place to look at as I presented this to the 32 people, which I presented to last night. I could then look back and see how many of them actually went out and did an invite for LinkedIn that weren't already invited or already linked to me and became followers of my WordPress site. So now I kind of have the things that I want to measure to deliver the things that I expect. And I haven't even talked about what I'm going to do in the do yet. It would have been very easy for me to say, okay, I'm going to give a presentation on the PDCA planning approach, and left it at that, and then I don't think I would have achieved all of the things that I have laid out in the act phase. But now I step back to the planning phase and I said, alright, well, I've defined my objectives, that's done. I was asked to speak, so that was the first thing. I defined my measures, so I know what I'm going to measure. I know the things that I'm going to need to have in place. Now, Robert didn't tell me when I was going to speak. He just said May or June, and he let me know. So I better follow up with Robert and make sure that I get the date, which I got a month later. So I needed to contact Robert, and I needed to set the date. I needed to set it so I made sure that I was able to attend, and I was planning based off of that date. So it's a backwards planning type thing. I also wanted to go out and make sure that I had current research on PDCA, even though I know what it is, the difference between a project and a program, and also wanted to think about some of the personal work. Why did I ever create this thing in the first place? My story that I explained to you about civil engineering. So I had to put all that stuff into my head and think about it before I actually did anything. So then I didn't really need a plan for this, so I didn't create one. But when the do, what was I going to do? Well, I said, well, I need to draft an outline. And initially I said, well, I'm going to know what is PDCA, what is a project, what is a program, my PDCA approach, and an example. Those are pretty good things. As you can see in the presentation, I actually combine program and project together to show the comparison. So, although the plan was created 3 months before this presentation, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do once I got here. I knew that Robert was going to require some kind of abstract from me, and he was going to want a picture so that he could send it out via the email, and he needed a bio. So I needed to write those things. I needed to get them current, because I've worked with him before, and I know what to expect. Then I needed to send that abstract picture and bio to Robert before the actual event, actually a month before, so that they have enough time to advertise what's going on. Get it up on the website, send it out to everybody. I knew I was going to need to sit down and create some slides. Even though this is a keynote presentation, I didn't want it to be overly wordy. I wanted to survey the participants, but I didn't have a survey, so I'm going to go out to SurveyMonkey and then create a survey. I needed to have some kind of handout, so that needed to be created. Before I actually delivered the keynote, I needed to send Robert the slides. And then, of course, on the 13th of May, I needed to deliver the keynote. And then with everybody that responded to me, either via email, WordPress, or LinkedIn, I want to follow up with them. I want to show that, the building of the social network is important to me. So I'll follow up and I'll thank them for attending. I'll make sure that they have the link to the survey and appreciate if they follow or link to me. So as you can see, in 10 minutes I was able to put together this plan and deliver on last night, almost exactly what I laid out. The beauty of this plan was that after he had asked me and I wrote this plan out, I didn't really do anything with this plan for a month. I had contacted Robert and I waited for his response, and he told me he was working on 2 different dates and he would let me know, and we waited, and finally when he got back to me, which was a month later at the next meeting, we sat down with the date and everything was put into place to deliver on May 13th. All I had to do was actually pull this plan back out and say, okay, what is it that I was going to do? So I did nothing with this plan for a month, and I was able to pick it up and know exactly what I was thinking a month ago and what I expected to do, and able to deliver on it. So this is the simple version of the PDCA model, something that individual could easily print out. You could put this on a PowerPoint slide just like I did and use it, or you can do it in Excel, or you can do it on a piece of paper. I actually did it in a little book that I was carrying on that day, and wrote everything down and tied it together. The numbers are how you do it. So number 1, you begin with the end in mind. You write down your 2 to 3, no more than 5 objectives that you want to come out of whatever it is that you're doing. If it's more than 5 objectives, you probably are trying to do more than one project. So you really need to start scoping what you're working on. Break it into a couple projects. Understand that if you're trying to do too much, you might be boiling the ocean, and you don't want to do that. Back it up to number 2. Figure out what are my milestones, what are my quantitative measures, and what are my qualitative measures that will lead me to I have achieved what I expected to achieve. I would expect that you probably have a little bit of everything in there. Don't get too crazy about it. Just put the big things, the things that you can measure that really tell you whether or not you achieved or didn't achieve what you were expecting. Then number 3, we jump into plans. You've already done your objectives and your measures. Who's going to do it? Do you need a team? Is there budget involved? What kind of research do you need to do? Do I need to have a plan? It's just that simple. Then you jump into the do. Finally, you're there. The thing that we always want to do first, do it last. Write it down and say, okay, I'm going to implement this. These are some of the major things that I'm going to get done. I might want to communicate, document, and train to make sure that whatever changes I put in place stay in place. And if I have any measures that I need to collect, I'm going to want to start measuring in this phase, and if I need to, I might need to baseline back in my planning. So this is the simple PDCA approach to project planning. So I would hope that by the end of this presentation, you know what PDCA is. I would hope that you know what the difference between a project and a program is, and I would hope that you understand the PDCA approach and can see how easily repeatable it is, how it can ensure your project success, how it allows for you to establish a simple timeline by putting dates against each one of those action items, and how you can do it quickly, possibly as quickly as I do it in 10 minutes whenever you're given a project. But some of the other values out of this planning mechanism I've explained as well. So if you developed a plan and you don't do anything with the plan for a while and you pick it back up, it's very easy to go, oh, I know exactly what I was trying to do. If you're working on something that takes several months, maybe even more than a year or two, which some projects do take that long, then you might end up going somewhere else and not working on that project anymore, and you have to hand it off. And what a great thing to do is to give them this one sheet to say, here, this is exactly what I was trying to accomplish when I set out, and here is where I am on the plan. I am right now in the middle of the do phase right here, and you can check off everything that's been done. One of the things that I've done with multiples of these PDCA plans is I just take all of the action items that are listed in the P, the D, the C, and the A and line them up in an Excel spreadsheet, and then to the right of them I put a start date and an end date and a POC to the right. And this way I now have a schedule aligned to my project plan. And if I have multiple projects going on that are all related to one thing, it becomes an integrated master schedule. So it actually allows for you to simply put together your project plan in Excel, and then if you need to, and you use Microsoft Project, you can cut and paste those things directly into Microsoft Project, and now you have something that's very easy to manage if you're good with that program. And you can create Gantt charts off of that and track your progress and report. So this simple approach takes less than an hour and gives you all of those abilities. So I had already told you that one of my goals was for the attendees, and you being one of them because you're listening to this, would connect to me through social media. I provided here a short bio that was provided to the attendees as well as sent out to all of the members for the ASQ section. And I've provided in here links to my LinkedIn, which I'd like you to go out and send me an invite to my WordPress blog, which I'd like you to go out and follow me on. Some things that you can expect is, one, I try to blog every day. I also have three standing blogs that I try to post about once a week. One is called Think Big, Take Small Steps, and I'm walking through my strategic planning approach. It's a three-phased approach that I've used for years now and is very effective, and I'm sharing the secret sauce. I also have a blog that I call Leaderment, and it is a combination of good leadership and good management skills and how they are important to work together to be a good leader and a good manager. Because I believe that leaders who do not have good management skills are not good leaders, and managers that do not have good leader skills are not good managers. So Leaderment is the combination of leadership and management, and it is something that I've been working on for many years, and I am sharing with the audience, and hopefully you, how to develop leadership, good leadership, and good management skills, starting with yourself and moving on to eventually managing an organization. I also have a Twitter, which I'll be honest with you, I don't use Twitter very much, but it does share out what's going on my WordPress blog, and sometimes on Yahoo or LinkedIn. I have a Yahoo account, but most of the things that are out there are political or religious or things that we don't need to talk about, so I don't normally look for anybody to follow me through that, although I do have some friends out there. And at the very bottom I have a survey, and that survey is 10 questions. It's very easy, and it's designed to actually capture whether or not some of this is sunk in, if it made sense, if you understood it, and if you felt that it was effective. And I would appreciate it if you would take the time to go out there to the SurveyMonkey tool with that address And take the survey for me and let me know whether or not I was effective in this presentation. So I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have learned to stop jumping to do.